My name is Violet Newby. I would like to welcome you to our Saturday session, and I have with me today Elisia Metz. But I'm not going to call her that. Her name is Lisi, trust me. We're going to talk about what it's like growing up in a family that is perhaps a little bit less than ideal, and some of the issues that brings about in your life as an adult, and maybe the ways that even affects being a parent. Hi,
All right.
Lisi.
Hi.
Go, girl.
So obviously I'm not a mom yet, and so I do have some curiosity about how did you learn to parent, even though you didn't really have an example growing up? Because that's something that I'm scared of. When I do become a parent, I have no idea how I'm gonna be, but I hope that I'll be a decent mom. But I just don't know. And so you give me some inspiration with the fact that you seem to have done a pretty good job with your kids. But you also come from a similar situation. So I'm just curious, how did you learn to parent?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm going to back up a little bit to say something to you. I was really scared to death that I was going to become what my parents were, especially my mother. I did not want to follow what was modeled in front of me. And I was very aware that that's what people usually do. So when I was 12 and my mom took off with this guy, so the four youngest of us 10 kids were all left at home by ourselves with our dad. And my mom and dad got divorced when I was 7.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 5 years with my mom. Yeah, I would definitely call those the nightmare years of life. But anyway, once my mom took off and dad came back home with us, I had all this responsibility. And I had to take care of my brothers. I had to take care of my sister. I had to take care of the house. I had a lot of things I had to do. And I started praying. I said, God, that's not how I want my house to look. That's not what I want my life to be looking like. It's definitely not the kind of parent I want to be. So I need you to teach me how to be a parent. And girl, I started asking God for that all the time. I was 6 years away from being anybody's mama, but I was already begging God to help me. Then I started paying very active attention to what people with decent kids looked like. Okay, some of those people were my aunts and uncles. Some of those people were people at church. Some of those people were my friends' parents. I became friends with really decent kids, and I would go to their house. Joe and Heidi.
Mm-hmm.
I went to both of their houses when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And tons of other people. I would go to their house, and I would get to know their mom and their dad, and I would pay attention. A lot of attention, how their mom and dad talked to them, things their mom and dad did, activities they were involved in together as a family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't put myself in a position as a surrogate kid necessarily, but I became really good friends enough that I would spend a day at their house. Sometimes I would spend the night on a weekend, a Friday night or something, and I really paid attention to the way that even my friends' parents acted.
Mm-hmm.
When I had kids, and my first son was easy. Really. My pregnancy was easy. He was easy. He was a really pleasant baby. I had no trouble. And so I started asking people, so you want to tell me how you learned to be a parent? Now here's what I loved. They would look at me so funny. Like, what now? Because if you grow up in a healthy home, you don't think anything about that. Mm-hmm. That's just how you are. That's the way you act. That's the way your mom and dad acted. Okay, that's normal. They didn't really even understand my question because I wasn't about to describe to them the level of abnormality or dysfunction at my house. Ugh, no way could people handle that at that time. I don't know if they can handle it now, but I'm not afraid to say it. Anyway, I wasn't about to go through that with people, but I understood I wasn't raised normally or in a healthy manner, but I could tell that they were, and I could tell the way they interacted with their kids was different. So I'd ask them. They didn't know how to explain it because that's just normal. They had no idea. So I asked a lot of people. I do mean a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Texas with my husband in 1979. There was an awesome lady there. I shared this, I think, on one of the last videos. Her name is Della Bartlett. I said, Della, you have 4 grown sons. All of them are very decent human beings, and all of them are really great men. I need you to tell me, what did you do? She gave me that same look, like, what now? I said, I'm dead serious. I need you to think about this because I need an answer. You know, my kids were 4 and 5. They're getting older. I need answers. I said, please tell me. She said, okay, let me think about this. She thought about this, and a couple weeks later, she got back to me. And I believe I might have already shared this, but it's so revolutionary, it's never going to hurt you to hear this time after time after time. And this is what she said to me. Most people raise their children to be children. I raised my children to be men. Wow. I'm telling you, I got that. I mean, I really got that. And that was when I started this writing program about what kind of men I wanted my sons to become. Men who were honest, men of integrity, men who were responsible, men who were hardworking, faithful, loyal, men of initiative, courage, and determination. So much of what you've heard from me or are going to hear from me soon. It really mattered to me. And I started writing down what that meant. My kids had to know the definition. Then I started writing down scripture that backed it up because I really understood that it wasn't just going to be because I said it. It needed to be because it was the expectation of God, the author of life, who ought to know what life looks like, you know, that they would be capable of then following the principles of God to develop a life that was purposeful and appropriate. And that was probably one of the biggest breakthroughs for me. Raise a child to be a man. Hardly anyone does that. I pay attention more and more today. People have perpetual children. You talk to a 25-year-old, they're not a grown-up. They grew up, but they're not a grown-up. I didn't want that. I really wanted my kids to grow up and be mature, responsible adults. Thank you, God, they are. But, you know, it was such a mind shift for me. Then, of course, and this one is hard, so, but, you know, I'm pretty much truthful, like real truthful, so you know I'm going to tell you. I really had to deal with my own stuff. I had to recognize there were things that my parents did, things that some of my older siblings did, just things that happened around me that really influenced me and molded me. And I needed to break that mold and to get away from that influence and be what I needed to be without regard for what I had been taught or shown. That was the tough part. So whenever I talk about change and I say you need to change, things need to change, you need to make a self-assessment. Oh, these are not just ideas to me. This is not just something somebody said. This is something I literally had to do in my own life. Like, this is not going to work, and this is not going to happen. And it just took hard work, truthfully. You know, it took hard work to deal with my temper, because, girl, did I ever have a temper. You know, it took a lot of hard work to deal with self-control. I didn't grow up around anybody with self-control. It was all out of control. That wasn't going to work out, you know?
Yeah.
I had to learn self-control. That was like zero fun for me. Really and truly, I kid you not, because I was just used to doing anything I felt like. And no, man, I had to get a hold of that, really get self-control. I had to learn about emotional responsibility. In other words, you didn't make me angry. I grew up in a whole household of people like, you just made me so angry. And I'm sorry, I didn't make you anything. You have a really bad temper. You became angry when? I didn't do that. I had to learn to take that into myself, like own my own stuff and go, I am angry. Not you made me angry. Not I'm angry because, no. I am an angry person. I am angry right now. And then not blast it all over everybody else. It's not your fault. It's my own responsibility that I got angry. And I don't need to act like an idiot when I am. And I guarantee you when I was young, I did. My kids saw it. They can tell you. Oh, my word. Okay? So I had a lot of learning to do, like a big learning curve. And much of it I learned with my kids. Now, thank God, I can really say this to you truthfully. By the time they were around 7 or 8, tons of stuff I had gotten hold of in my life. But wow, some of those really challenging years of their life and mine, we went through it together. And so you can't go, okay, well, I'm not going to be anything like my mom and my dad. In fact, let me tell you something really crucial about this. It's a big deal. If you say, I will never do this, and I'm certainly not going to be like that, and you take that seed and you bury that seed deep inside of your heart, that is called a bitter root expectation. And you keep fertilizing that with bitter tears and bitter spirit. Do you know what? It's going to grow up. And guess what's going to become? A fruitful tree. It's going to carry the same bitter fruit that you swore you would never do or never be. Ho ho, caution, caution. Don't do it. If your mom and dad have really hurt you and they've really made you angry and they've just wrecked your life, and I acknowledge to you, I get that extraordinarily well, do not take a bitter seed and plant it down in your heart and say, I will never be like that, because you will be exactly like that, especially if you keep that bitterness growing and growing until it becomes a huge tree that will literally give you bitter fruit to eat. You have to forgive the junk they did and say, much different thing. I will be different with God's help. That's not the same as I will never be, because you will become that. It is, I will be different with God's help. Ooh, be careful about those bitter seeds. And it's really interesting. I do have one sister especially who planted those bitter seeds into her heart and still fertilizes them to this very day. And one of my other sisters recently said to me, you know, she is almost exactly like the absolute worst of both mom and dad. And it's true. So I forgave my mom and my dad. I did not make determinations about what I would not be. I made determinations in my own heart and spirit about what I was going to be with God's help.
Yeah, that was all very informative. I find myself doing that now because, like, that's just something I've always been kind of worried about. Like, I don't want to do things the way that my parents did them. But I don't also just want to say, like, I'm never going to be like them. Because, quite frankly, I know that everyone has the possibility to do some really awful things if you don't really, like, go about it in a way that's healthy. So, yeah, I caught myself, like, just paying attention to people, like, some of my older friends that have kids and stuff. Like, I'll start paying attention to them and see what they do with their kids, and I'll pay attention to things that I see that I like and things that I'm like, I don't know that I'll do that with my kids, but okay if you do that with yours.
That's a
So,
really
yeah.
good point. Not everything works
Right.
for everybody. So you kind of have to be willing to learn and try out some things. And don't be afraid to, especially with a little bit older kids, because a lot of people don't even catch on until their kids are 7 to 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
To say, okay, you know, I haven't done this really well to date.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try this other thing, and we'll give it a couple months. And if it doesn't seem to really work well or fit in our family, it's all right. We can all be experimental or try new stuff, and it's all right, but we don't have to do it forever.
Right.
And so I think that's okay. I think that's good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's really great to hear that, like, you didn't always have this stuff figured out from the get-go.
Oh, my
Because, like,
word.
sometimes when I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, man, this one was just, she was born 65.
I wish I had been. It would have been much easier.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Even
no,
in
I
my
mean, like,
even
we're
in
all
my
figuring
kids'
it out.
teen years, I was really a good parent. Like, even my kids would say that.
Mhm.
Honey, I did not do everything right.
Right.
If I were with my kids now and they were teenagers, land's sakes, I'd have been so much better. Which brings up a great point. I believe that young people, and I do mean 20 or 30, maybe even 40-year-old young people, they better have an active relationship with someone.
Mhm.
If you didn't have great parents, then get your hands on a mentor. Get your hands on somebody older and wiser than you, that when you're not doing that great or you're really struggling in an area particularly, you can go to that person and say, here's what I'm really doing. You got to be very transparent. Don't try to fake it out. Oh, girlfriend, you know me. I'm going to give it to you so straight about
Right.
my own self. Yeah, you have to get to that place where you're comfortable enough in your own skin to really own your stuff and say, man, This is what I'm doing. I don't think it's working out so well. What in the world? Please help me. And let somebody talk to you. You don't have to go home and do everything they say.
Right.
But at least if you're dealing with someone older and wiser, you get some input about what in the world that you can't quite figure out. I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's funny. I actually recently got that advice to seek out a mentor. And I think it's a great idea. It's just trying to figure out exactly who I want to ask basically right now. But like when I was getting this advice from someone, it was a man that leads my young adult group. He was talking to me about it because he knows that like I struggle with some things, and he's like, well, it'd probably be a good idea to get a mentor, but if you get a mentor, you need to be blatantly honest. Like, you can't hide things, otherwise you're still not just going to get any help. You might as well not have a mentor if you're just going to hide things.
Right.
So that's been something like I'm processing through right now.
Okay.
So I find it interesting that you bring that up.
You know what I always say? If you hear something twice, you better really pay attention.
Right.
If you hear something 3 times, you better get on it.
Right.
So if you hear this again soon, this could be a clue, girl.
Right.
Okay.
Good to know. All right. So my next question would be, as you were growing up, how did you deal with your trauma? Did you have healthy coping mechanisms? Did you have unhealthy coping mechanisms? Or did you have a mix of both?
Oh, lands. Okay, that's a really great question and somewhat difficult to answer.
Okay.
Because it's really ugly. I mean, it really and truly is.
Right.
Okay. By the time this one airs, I will have already had online the video about developing coping skills. So I really want you to go back, if you haven't seen that, at the end of this video, somewhere in the next few days. I want you to watch that coping skills video because I think it will really help you understand what I'm about ready to say. If you watch that video about coping skills, it will really help you a lot. It will help you understand some of what I'm about to say. We all have coping skills. The challenge is, a lot of them, they're not very healthy. And we generally know the coping skills that we're taught. So my parents' coping skills were to get angry, fight, blare, blow up, a lot of those kinds of things. Sometimes my dad's coping skill was avoidance. He would go out in his wood shop and, beat on things and cut things apart and, like not have to hang with my mom anymore and not have all this active chaos and conflict going on. So he would get avoidant. Both my mom and my dad were avid readers. My mom did finish 8th grade. My dad never even finished 8th grade. Both of my parents were really bright people, though. They read all the time. And so sometimes my dad would hide inside of a book. Wow. I still understand that one extremely well. So there were not necessarily a lot of good coping skills shown to me, and I definitely did not have any coping skills. Not that were positive anyway. I would take a book and put it in the back of my shorts and climb up in a tree, way up in a tree, like where they couldn't see me, and certainly none of my older brothers and sisters would be able to get up that high without, breaking the tree, and just sit up there for hours and read. Because I don't want to be with those people. It's a whole lot easier to be by myself. So I definitely learned avoidance. I definitely learned how to pitch a fit and scream and act terrible and be mean, like to my younger sister especially. All the things that were shown to me, that's just exactly what I did. By time I was probably 8 or 9, I developed a different coping skill. Or maybe it was a similar one, but it had a unique twist with me. And this was it. I think I was born to be really protective and kind of defend people that were weaker or smaller. And so I finally learned how to apply that to myself. Daddy was gone. There were various male personages in and out of my house, and a lot of things went down. And so I learned to be really a fighter, If someone would come after me or someone would verbally come after me, I'd fight back. Like, man, you are not going to touch me. You are not going to mess with me. You are not going to talk to me like that. And, dude, I could fight. And I would fight, too. There was a kid in my elementary school. God pity him. He decided one day that he wanted to kiss me.
Oof.
So he backed me up against the wall in a corner. And he did kiss me. And then I did knock his 2 front teeth right out of his face.
Oh, my.
Because, honey, I already told him, don't mess with me. I didn't intend to put up with somebody messing with me. That was what I did. So, yeah, I really did learn to be a fighter. That's the only time I fought physically. I think it was the only time anybody really caged me in. But I did learn to fight.
Yeah.
Like, really, verbally, I learned to fight. In high school, well, maybe even in junior high school, one of the coping mechanisms I used was to get attention. Because, I was the eighth of 10 kids. I didn't get very much attention.
Mhm.
And I learned to get attention. Like, I'd be loud and really boisterous and kind of wild and crazy and do kind of wild and crazy things.
Mhm.
And it kind of took away some of the stress or some of the pressure of all the other kinds of crazy. Like, to me, it was a much more positive, fun kind of crazy.
Right.
I definitely coped by having good friends.
Mm.
I always had way more than one good friend, a number of good friends. What was funny was oftentimes those friends didn't know each other. Like, I'd have a really good friend at school and a really good friend at church and a really good friend at a club or an organization that I belonged to. So I'd have a various different good friends. I'm not saying there was anything wrong with any of them. They were just different friends from different places. But I really did have good friends. That certainly taught me the importance of having support and someone to encourage you and someone to walk alongside of you. I never knew anything about that before, so I kind of got a hold of that one by myself. It really wasn't until I was an adult, like well into being an adult. I would say when one of my sons started having a lot of trouble at school, like a lot of trouble in school, really acting out so much of what he had seen and so much of the abuse and the chaos that we had lived through together, within my marriage, that they started calling me from school. His teacher was so concerned about him. There was some heavy-duty stuff going down. And so they told me, you got to get this kid into counseling. I mean, you have got to get this kid into counseling. And I did. And the counselor with whom he counseled for about 2 years was a great counselor. And I started going to that counselor. It helped me process some things. I would say it was really, truly the beginning of counseling things. And I didn't even go into what my life was like. I still hadn't really talked about my home life or my family of origin yet. I didn't talk to him about it. He'd ask me all this stuff. I'd say, that doesn't have anything to do with my life now. There's another coping mechanism, denial. It wasn't a big one for me, but when it came to my home life or my family and how insane all of that was and some of those things were, I wasn't ready to talk about it yet. So I was just like, I don't really need to talk about that. So denial. I would say easily the most challenging time for me in dealing with my own stuff and my life things was when I went to nursing school. Oh, helped me a lot, because I started nursing school at 27. And before you can take care of someone else, you really do need to take care of yourself. So many of the ways of my life that I had not taken care of myself, including dealing with my stuff, really showed up in nursing school. I had one nursing instructor who told me in no uncertain terms, you will not get out of this nursing program alive, because I'm not going to let you.
Yeah. I've heard some brutal things about nursing programs.
girl.
My mom's an RN, and
Okay.
I remember when she was going through the program, and so that was going to be one of my questions. Was it as brutal for you as it was for most of the people that I hear about?
It was really something. Here's what was cool. Because of that, I felt really compelled to go find myself a counselor, and I did. And all the time before that, I'd always gone to guy counselors. I think like a guy. I am a guy psychologically on paper. So, I really didn't want to deal with a chick. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to work in a profession with all kinds of women, and I'm going to be a labor and delivery nurse. All my patients are going to be a woman. Yeah, dude, I better deal with this stuff. I better go to a chick. So I go to this woman. Great sense of humor God has. This woman was my nursing instructor's next door neighbor.
Oh my.
True fact.
Isn't that funny?
Oh, land sakes, it was great. No names here, so nobody will ever know, but, Anyway, she said she doesn't have her life all together, just so you know. In terms of confidentiality, I can't divulge anything to you, but she said, don't let her make you nervous or scared like she is. Whoa, did that ever help me? Like, immediately pulled the plug, took all the pressure off. It was awesome. Anyway, she was such a great counselor. Like, I went to her for almost 2.5 years. She was astounding because she was very supportive and she was really caring, but she was really willing to be confrontational. I'd say to her, oh, I don't really think we need to talk about it. She'd say, Violet, not only do you need to talk about it, but we are going to talk about this. Wow. You know, if she didn't care about me so much, I would have been really ticked that she always wanted to get in my face about stuff. But she really cared about me. Like, she was very formative in my thinking, even now, because I don't mind getting into someone's face about stuff, but I really let them know that I care. She taught me that. That was really helpful. And I really went through some stuff, and I really dealt with some things. That was amazing. It really taught me a lot of things. She definitely talked to me about coping and about the necessity of even a better support system than I had. She said, you are not going to get through this alone. It isn't going to happen. And yeah, like, she met with my kids a couple of times. She said, your kids are so well adjusted. Like, girl, you're doing okay in that department, which I really felt like I was by that point. I didn't know how much all the stress and whatever of what was going on with my education was affecting my kids, because, yes, it could be brutal. Oh, help me. But it was great for my kids. And I did not neglect my kids, or it wasn't, I don't really think it was detrimental to my kids. I think most of my nursing education was really helpful to my kids. And a lot of what I learned about myself and the confidence that I gained in myself and the skills that I learned, not just professionally, but personally, because I was in counseling at that time. That really helped me. Another place I learned a lot of coping, oh dear, was in my second marriage. Because my kids were grown by the time I got married again. I wasn't going to put my kids through all that. And there were a number of issues, as there are in any marriage anywhere, you know. And I grew up a lot in that marriage. I learned a lot of things. Some of those things I learned the hard way on the negative side, which I'm not even going to go into, because there are way too many people out there that still know that man, and I'm not going to discuss that. So I don't think that's cool. But, you know, I learned a great deal. I really did. I learned a lot of practical patience in that relationship because I really loved him. You know, I learned a lot of practical give and take. Before that, because of all the fight in me, it was pretty much going to be my way or no way. I was a very strong personality. Well, I still am. But I mean, whoa, honey, I really was. And I learned give and take. I learned how to have an argument and come to a conclusion where we might not agree, but we don't hate each other. We're not going to be at odds still forever and ever and ever. We can just agree. And so I really learned a lot in that relationship. They weren't always easy lessons to learn, but yeah, I really learned a lot interrelationally with my second husband.
Sounds good. I guess my next question would be, how old were you when you came to know the Lord?
3.5.
3.5. Oh, okay, younger than I thought it was going to be. So how did having God in your life affect your coping mechanisms? Like, do you think having a relationship with God helped you through some things?
Wow, yeah.
Like, what did that look like?
I don't think it had anything to do with coping,
Okay.
just so you know. Because today I understand a great deal about coping skills. I don't think that was it at all, just so you know.
Okay.
But the fact that I knew God and He was my friend, because mostly when I was a kid, that's the way I saw God. You know, I wouldn't say like my big bud in the sky. You know, that's not exactly how I would say it. But He truly was my friend. And a good friend, a friend that was really going to look out for me kind of thing. So when I was having a terrible rough time and I was really scared and my mom and dad would fight the way they fought and, oh, brother, yeah, or, you know, my older brothers and sisters would have these kind of things, just so much chaos going on around me, I would go hide in the back of the closet. Remember I told you about that avoidance thing? I would go hide in the back of the closet and just talk to God. And I knew He was going to be there and He was going to care. You know, at that point in time, I wasn't even in school yet. I didn't have anywhere to get a hold of a support system. Could have been my mom and dad, could have been my siblings, but it surely was not them. And it was God. And I would go talk to Him and hang out with Him and sing and like read the Bible and encourage myself. And so I don't think it was much coping as much as it was having this friend that no matter what, He was going to love me. He was going to be there.
So how exactly did you come to know God, though? I mean, you're 3.5. Like, who and should, like, how?
Okay. Well, my mom did take us to church.
Okay.
And we did listen to kids, like radio shows and stuff. But really, how I did was because I learned how to read, and I learned how to read out of the King James Version of the Bible. So as I read,
And how old were you when you learned how to read?
3.5.
Okay.
Yeah. So as I read, I really knew that I was a sinner. Like, whoa. Well, I got beat so often, like it wasn't no-brainer stuff for me to know that I was terrible. But, you know, I really wasn't. I was really a curious kid. I was into stuff all the time, and I would accidentally break stuff. I wasn't careless, but I wasn't graceful. You know, just, oh, my lands. I was always in trouble. And often my younger sister, she would do naughty things, but I always got blamed for that. She was real cute, and she'd go, this little innocent look. You know, she didn't get it. I'd get it. My older brother was crippled, so he'd get into all this mischief, but they couldn't hardly whoop him, so I was always alongside, so I was getting that one. I mean, I just knew I was bad. It wasn't hard for me to understand that I was a sinner. That was pretty basic stuff, you know. But when I understood there was an answer for that, like I didn't have to carry this weight of guilt and this, I guess I'll use the word shame or incredible, you know, that I was so horrible. I didn't have to carry that stuff around. Man, dude, that was like the greatest news I ever heard. I was all in. So I started telling my mom, I need to ask Jesus because I'm going to go to hell. Mom was like, you're 3. I said, no, I mean it. You know I'm a sinner. I know. I said, no, I mean it. I'm a sinner. I'm going to go to hell. Finally, she's like, fine, just go ahead. You know, I got down on my knees next to this little orange naugahyde couch we had. I was like, oh, God, I know I'm a sinner. There was no doubt about this one. You know, some people, they ask Jesus to be their friend or their savior because they want a friend. I just wanted fire insurance. I didn't want to go to hell no how. I mean, I'm telling the truth to you where my head was as a little kid.
Right.
I'm like, oh, God, I know I'm a sinner. I really know that I need Jesus to save me because, man, I'm bad. Like, please. And please forgive me because I know that you will and I know that you can. And he did. Oh, my word, girl. I got up. I was like, yes. I really got it. There's no question. I always say God came and chased after me because he did. You know, I'm severely dyslexic. I don't think I could have learned how to read in school. I couldn't tell time till 5th grade. Those numbers, that clock, honey, none of that made any sense to me. I don't think I ever would have been able to learn how to read, except God taught me how to read, and so I could. I really mean that with all my heart. And so he came after me. I didn't go looking for him.
Interesting. How did God teach you how to read?
Oh, girl. All right, I'll share the story because it's really strange. But, you know, this will help you know that I'm a unique individual.
Right.
Okay, because this is nothing like kids how to learn how to read. I've taught people around the globe English, how to read, little kids. Girlfriend, like, this is not how you learn how to read. Okay, so I stole the family Bible. This is a true story, you know, right off the coffee table, took it up in the back of my sister's closet where this was a cedar chest. Oh, and I stole a flashlight from my dad, and I also took that up there. And I would get in the cedar chest and close the lid and all these old clothes and turn on the light. Okay, so in the beginning, in the word beginning, there are 2 N's, in case, you know, spell it out. So in, one color, yellow actually, in the red, beginning was God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and the Spirit hovered over the face of the deep. All right, so there were 5 words I started with. Doesn't matter what they were, but they were all there. So I started, and I would color them in. And I don't know. Pretty soon I knew those. I would write down the word, and I would say to my mom, what word is this? That's in. Okay. What word is this? The. Okay. Pretty soon, you know, I just kind of like started filling in the rest of the parts. Here's what's really interesting. This is how I know this was God. In John 1, that was the other place the Holy Spirit took me. In the beginning was the Word. And was one of my other words, of course. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. Like, oh my gracious. It just started to click. once I knew those words. In, the, and, was. Yeah, just okay. Just started filling in the places. That's how I learned how to read.
Interesting.
Out of a stolen Bible.
Yeah, first in. That's ironic. So, you were talking about, how you got saved and all that. And you said at 3.5 you knew you were a sinner, and part of how you knew that was because, you were getting in trouble all the time. So that just kind of shows me that when you say that, getting in trouble all the time showed that you were a sinner. So that's a way that your self-image was affected by how others were treated you, correct?
Yes.
So in what other ways was your self-image affected based off of how you grew up in a dysfunctional family?
Oh, my goodness. We give people messages all the time, whether we're doing it intentionally or unintentionally. Okay. If we look at someone and we directly look at them, and we regularly and often directly look at them, and we listen actively to what they're saying, and we affirm what they're telling us, like, yes, I understand, or I can see why you feel that way, then we're establishing their worth. In the same way, when we don't look at them, when we're constantly distracted, when we can't pay any attention, when we're too busy, when I'll get to you in a minute, when everything tells that person, you really aren't very important to me because everything and everybody else, including my own convenience, because Lord knows you're bothering me right now, is so much important than you are. And when a kid comes to you and says, hey, guess what? And you go, yeah, okay, I already knew that. Or that was really stupid. Where did you ever get such a stupid idea? When someone is constantly assaulting you verbally and putting you down, and I'm not even going to go to the level of abuse I lived with because you probably don't even need to hear it, and I'd rather not repeat it. But when you go through that as a kid, day after day, hundreds of times, because remember, if I just had to listen to it out of my mom or my dad, that would be one thing, but I had all these older brothers and sisters. Lance, did I ever get this message? Like, did I ever get this message? Then for the rest of your life, you just think you're a headache and a pain in the neck. Not only do you think that something is wrong with you, you think you are wrong. Like, you should have never been born, because Lord knows I heard that plenty of times. It had been better if I never had you. I tried hard to have an abortion and not have you. I did everything I could to try to make myself miscarry. If you already know that you are wrong, you should have never been born, your life isn't of any value. This goes on affecting you and affecting you and affecting you. It affects every decision you make. It affects every feeling you have. It affects every action you take, because you're already having self-doubt and questioning yourself. And so, of course, what else are you going to do but do it wrong? Because that's what you are. You're wrong. Yeah, it affects everything. It most assuredly affected my marriages. It affected the kind of people I chose to marry. It affected the way I allowed those people to treat me, and I felt like I deserved that. I actually thought that. Really and truly. My parents certainly told me that I did, so they were probably right. This is the one that really gets me. Mom and Dad, oh, how I want you to hear me about this. You are the person placed in your child's life to protect them, and you're the adult. They believe you. And so you know what? If you're not protecting them and you're lying to them, you're telling them how they're worthless, and they don't have any value, and their life is worthless, and it'd be better if you were dead anyway. You're the authority in their world. They're going to believe everything you say, and it's going to stick with them forever. So I don't care how mad you get or how upset you are or what went on when you were pregnant with that baby. You better deal with some of this stuff. Don't you dare lay that crap on your kids, because lo and behold, I carried that stuff around for many long decades. And it just wrecked my world and how I thought about myself. For real. I have a photograph of myself. If I can find it, I'll let you put it up on there so y'all could see what I'm talking about. I have a photograph of myself, and I have occasionally looked at that picture and gone, holy Hannah. Because at that very point in my life, I would look in the mirror and still say what I always heard from my mom and my dad, and a couple of my sisters especially, and my one older brother whose responsibility it had been to look after me when I was little. Dang if you ain't ugly. I really mean it. Look at this photograph. Because you know what? What someone tells you authoritatively over and over and over is what you believe, even if you're looking straight in a mirror and it's not the truth, but you believe it. And lo, I believed it. And so, oh my word, it took me so long, to turn off the tape recorder in my mind. You know, this litany of just self-insult and self-abuse and really, in many ways, self-hatred because of what I heard, just like poured into me like a flood through my childhood when it was formative and I believed it all. It took so long to turn off that tape recorder. It didn't take quite as long to replace it. And now when I talk to myself, I don't hear that stuff. In fact, even into my 50s, when I was like hormonal or, certain kinds of fluctuations would happen, it would still come back, even though I had learned to speak to myself differently internally. Now I can really say, I think like in more than 10 years, yeah, I don't speak or haven't heard those messages inside of my mind. That's a very long time it took to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like active, hard work to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, girl. It just went on and on and on and on and on affecting me.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I was in counseling a couple years back, and my counselor had me do this exercise where I basically wrote down the things that I tell myself when I like make a mistake or something like that. And so I was like, okay. And so I just wrote down honestly, like things like that I would tell myself were like things like I'd say like you're an idiot, or like what is wrong with you, or just like really like just not nice things to myself. And it would definitely be worse than that, but she had me write these things
I know
down.
these messages.
Yeah. And then I brought it in, I showed her what I wrote down, and she was like, okay, do you see how this is affecting your self-esteem? I was like, it is? She was like, yes. And I didn't even know I had self-esteem, because I was like, I'm a pretty happy person. Like, I'm cool, I'm good. And then I started paying attention to how I talk to myself, because after she pointed that out, I like actually started paying attention to it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like so mean to myself. Like, I'm just repeating things that like I've heard my whole life, but like things that like when I was a kid, it would destroy me when I heard it from other people. So why am I talking to myself like that now? And I had no idea how much it affected me until I actually put into practice not doing that anymore, and like replacing those thoughts with much nicer and kinder words to myself. And like just I saw how that affected me, and how much more confident I became, and just like how much it changed me. And so like I just think it's a really interesting topic right there. Because like I see people in my life, like I've known several other people that like to make like self-deprecating jokes all the time, and like you can see that these people are very obviously unhappy, even though like at face value they're like laughing about themselves and all that, but like you can tell just like behind that very, very thin curtain they're putting up is a very unhappy person. And I always try to like talk to people that do that now. Like whenever I see it, I always try to talk to them and tell them like, hey, like you really shouldn't talk to yourself like that. I know you think it's a joke. I know you think you're being funny, but like in reality, you're being awful to yourself, and it actually is affecting you. And sometimes they don't listen.
I know.
Which is really sad.
Well, sometimes we don't really understand what all the implications of what that is.
Right.
I think for me, I probably did understand it, but it was so ingrained. It's very fascinating. A young person I know, they've been going to this guy that works on this thing called muscle memory. Places in your body that'll hold on to tension, or even as you get older, start to have, physically debilitating results because of things that happened to you or things that people said, and that it literally affects your body at a cellular level. And this person said to me, I can't even imagine the damage inside of your body, Violet, from the things people said to you and the way you continued to repeat them to yourself. And so I really want to say this to you to the very best of your ability. Speak words of life into your child's life. Do you understand that in the Proverbs, and we've talked about this before, that in the tongue is the power of life and death? And I know this. You want to be a good parent, and being a good parent involves speaking life into your child. So notice your child's gifts. Notice your child's best abilities. Notice the qualities about your child's personality that are beautiful and wonderful and interesting, and tell your child those things. Speak words of encouragement and words of praise and words of life into the life of your child. That's what you can do as a mom or dad. That's like the greatest value and the longest dividends you could ever imagine. That's the truth, Lisa. Oh,
Yeah.
my word, girl. So, yeah, the last thing I'm going to address to you personally is self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn how to do it over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I read this amazing book called Telling Yourself the Truth. And in there, it's a couple of psychologists and a pastor. They talk about saying things that are true to yourself. I had to literally learn to say to myself, because I was told how stupid I was, how ugly I was, how worthless I was, how it would be better if I were dead, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so I had to learn to say to myself, Violet, you are a very bright woman.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't believe that before. I actually know it now. I mean, the evidence is there, but I didn't believe it anyway. Violet, you are a very bright woman. Violet, you are a very kind woman. Violet, you are a very capable woman. Violet, your life is of value. Wow. I couldn't even say those words when I first found them. I could write them. I couldn't say them out loud. I really couldn't. Now I know that. It took so long to know. And so I'm so glad, Lisa, you're young and you can learn to speak truth to yourself, and truth that is encouraging, truth that builds up your heart, truth that strengthens your life, truth that increases your value, because when you really know yourself and your worth, then you can be of true value to someone else. So I'm really glad that you're learning that at a young age.
Yeah.
And may your life be so much better
Oh.
because you found that out and worked on that.
Yeah, no, and I totally understand what you say when you say it takes a long time to actually really get that down. Because, like, yes, I'm aware of these practices, and I do try to do them, but I definitely still have my moments where I talk to myself just like I used to a long time ago, and just, like, things that I've heard a while back. Like, I still have those moments where, like, all the healthy things that I tell myself just go out the window, and I'm just, like, self-deprecating like crazy. And then you have to get out of that and start rebuilding again, basically, because it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of situation.
And I don't think you and I have talked about this, so let me tell you.
Yeah.
When you really assault yourself verbally,
Mm-hmm.
you literally need to get in front of a mirror. Just like if your friend assaulted you verbally, really got on you, and you'd confront them and say, you may not speak to me like that. And they'd say to you, I'm sorry, and you'd extend forgiveness. You need to get in front of a mirror. You need to look yourself right in the eyes and say, I did not appreciate you insulting me, verbally assaulting me. That was not okay. Say, yes, I know. Please forgive me. And tell yourself, I forgive you. Because we need to forgive ourselves. If we can't even forgive ourselves, it's very difficult to forgive someone else. So it's really crucial. Get in front of a mirror, out loud, with your voice. Admit to yourself, that was not kind, that was not appropriate. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. Ask your own self for forgiveness and give it to yourself. It's really a huge thing. It's very helpful. It will help you to heal in ways you don't even know yet. So try that, girl. And get back to me.
Definitely.
I'd really like to thank you so much for joining me today on Paint a Beautiful Picture. I hope you learned something new today. We went lots of places that were kind of unexpected for me, so that was totally cool. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you would like to know more, please get in touch with me. That would be really awesome. And until we meet again, honestly, may you paint a beautiful picture across your child's life. Thank you. You may find additional information on our paintabeautifulpicture.com website. Additionally, you may watch me on Rumble, and you may also listen to a podcast on Buzzsprout or Spreaker, all under the name Paint a Beautiful Picture. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You may subscribe, and if you are interested in receiving notifications, please hit the notifications button.